You've already strived to deliver an impeccable job. You gave your best. You spent hours refining every detail. And when it's time for recognition, did someone else take the credit? Sounds unfair, right? But let me tell you, this happens more often than you think. And if you've been through it, know that you're not alone. In the corporate environment, there are opportunistic people, backstage manipulators, and even those apple polish who know exactly how to appropriate your effort without arousing suspicion. The worst. Often those who should see this, the boss, the leadership, the team, simply ignore it or pretend not to see it. I'll tell you a story that will make you angry, and at the same time, teach you exactly how to deal with this type of situation. I spent days dedicating myself to an extremely important project. I did research, strategized, created an impeccable presentation, and when it came time for the meeting, mystery. A colleague who was barely involved in the process simply took all the credit. With a smile on his face, he presented my ideas as if they were his own. I had no reaction at the time. It was as if I had been erased from history. And the boss? He was impressed. With him, not with me. If you've ever felt that indignation, that mixture of anger and helplessness, I know exactly what went through your mind. Should I confront it? Would it seem envious if I said something? Would I get a reputation for being problematic? This doubt destroys anyone, because in the workplace there is a subtle game going on all the time, a game of appearances where not always the most competent wins, but the one who knows how to manipulate the situation best. And this is where most people get lost. They think that recognition will come naturally, that the boss will realize who really deserves it, that justice will be done. But believe me, if you don't take strategic action, this type of person will continue to steal your merit. And worse, you may end up being forgotten. Now let me ask you a question. What would you do in this situation? Would you let it go and keep working as if nothing had happened? Would you take satisfaction with your colleague in front of everyone? Would you think about going to the boss and telling the truth? The right answer can define the future of your career. I know because I've been through this, and in the end, I made this guy deeply regret it, but I didn't do it with shouting or with unnecessary fights. Use strategy, and that's exactly what I'm going to show you in this video. How to turn the tide, how to protect yourself, and how to ensure that no one ever takes advantage of your effort again. So stay with me until the end, because what I'm going to tell you can completely change the way you deal with sabotage at work. Do you know what the biggest problem of all this is? Most people don't even realize they're being left behind until it's too late. At first, it seems like something small, almost insignificant, an idea you shared informally in a conversation, a project detail you mentioned without much thought, feedback you gave in a meeting. But suddenly, when the moment to shine arrives, the one who receives the compliments is not you. And the worst, you sit there listening to your boss praise someone for something you did, not knowing if you should interrupt, if you should defend yourself, or if you just swallow hard and pretend nothing happened. It destroys your morale, undermines your motivation, and can even put your career at risk. And what makes it all the more revolting is that there are people who specialize in this type of dirty game. They know exactly how to appropriate the effort of others without being noticed. And the most dangerous? They do it in different ways, with very specific strategies. There are three main types of colleagues who steal credit at work, and it's critical that you learn to identify them before they destroy your credibility. The first of them is the wolf in disguise. This is that colleague who seems to be your friend. He approaches you, creates a relationship of trust, asks questions about what you are developing, is interested in your ideas, praises your work. But deep down, he is not there to support you. He is there to gather information. And when the time is right, he uses what you've shared to promote himself. The wolf in disguise is subtle. He doesn't steal your idea in a blatant way. He changes a detail here, changes a point there, and when you realize it, the original idea that was yours now seems to have come out of his head. What if you try to complain? He will simply say that he had the same idea as you, or that it was a team building. Have you ever been there? But there is an even more brazen type, the apple polish. This is the one who doesn't worry about coming up with good ideas or doing exceptional work. He knows that the secret to growing in the company is not necessarily being competent, but knowing how to be in the right place at the right time and say the right words to the right person. The apple polish is always glued to the boss, participates in all informal conversations, knows what to say and when to say it to earn points. He may not even understand what you did, but he only needs to hear you commenting on your work for him to talk to the boss at the first opportunity as if he were on top of everything. And the worst, he does it in a way that feels natural. Suddenly, the boss is associating your project with his name. Suddenly, he becomes the reliable person, the reference. Meanwhile, you continue in your corner, working hard without getting the credit you deserve. And finally, there is the one who is the most dangerous of all, the manipulator. This is the true strategist of the corporate environment. He doesn't just steal credit, he distorts the perception that others have about you. The manipulator operates behind the scenes. He knows how to play with the opinions of others, how to plant doubts, how to influence in subtle ways. He may praise your work in front of you, but behind your back, he makes comments that undermine your credibility. He says things like, "Yes, he did a good job, but I had to revise a lot." Or he has good ideas, but still needs guidance. And when you least expect it, people start to see you in a different way. The boss starts to have doubts about your competence. Colleagues start to trust the manipulator more than you. And in the end, he takes credit for something you did without anyone questioning it. Now let me ask you, have you ever come across any of these types in your work? Worst of all, they often act so sneakily that we only realize what's happening when we've already been harmed. And if you don't realize this in time, you can end up being invisible to the boss and even miss important opportunities. Imagine if this happens at a crucial moment, such as in the competition for a promotion or in the performance evaluation. You can be the best employee in the world, you can deliver incredible results, but if someone knows how to manipulate the narrative better, the recognition goes to them, not to you. And do you know what the biggest trap of all this is? Many people think that the problem will solve itself. They believe that, in the end, the truth comes out, that the boss will realize who really works, or that it's not worth wearing yourself out for it. But the reality is that if you don't act strategically, this cycle will never end. You're going to keep being left behind. You're going to keep seeing other people grow at your expense. You're going to keep feeling undervalued. And I know how much it hurts. I know how frustrating it is to feel that your work is being ignored, that your effort is being appropriated by someone who doesn't deserve it. But calm down, because the good news is that there is a way to turn this around. There is a strategy to protect yourself from these opportunists and ensure that next time no one else steals your credit. And that's exactly what I did when I went through this situation. At first, I was lost. I felt wronged, betrayed, not knowing how to react. But instead of letting the anger consume me, I decided to take action. I began to study the patterns of these people, to understand how they operate, to develop ways to shield myself and regain my position. And the result? I made that colleague who stole my credit deeply regret it. But I didn't do it just like that. I didn't scream. I didn't create a scandal. I didn't stoop to his dirty game. I was strategic, and now I'm going to show you exactly how you can do the same. What I've discovered can completely change the way you deal with this type of situation. Because it's not enough to just work hard. You need to understand how the dynamics of the work environment work. You need to know how to position yourself. You need to learn to protect yourself. And if you think that it is enough just to trust that one day recognition will come, well, then you may be making one of the biggest mistakes of your career. But calm down, because I'm going to show you exactly what to do. I'm going to teach you how to turn the tables, how to stand up smartly, and how to make sure that from now on, no one else takes advantage of your effort. And the best? Without having to get your hands dirty, without creating enemies, and without losing anyone's respect. Because there is a right way to do it, and that's what I'm going to tell you now. At that moment, I was overcome by a mixture of indignation and frustration. How could someone just steal all my effort, appropriate my ideas, and still come out as the hero of the situation? But instead of acting impulsively, I decided I was going to play smart. I knew that if I made a scandal, or let myself be carried away by anger, I could end up making my situation worse. After all, in the workplace, the most competent do not always win. Often, those who know how to play the game win. And I was determined to turn this game in my favor. The first thing I did was start documenting everything. If there is something that these opportunists cannot overthrow, it is the facts. So I started to record every detail of my work, every idea I had, every strategy I created, every advance I made in the project. Everything was written down and recorded. I started sending emails with copies to myself, keeping a conversation history, saving every version of my documents. If someone tried to question or discredit my work, I would have concrete proof that it was mine. But I knew that just having proof wasn't enough. It needed a more elaborate plan, because these handlers know how to dodge. They are masters at distorting the truth, turning the victim into the villain, and playing innocent when they are caught. So I decided that I wasn't going to just accuse him. I was going to expose it in the most subtle and effective way possible. And that's where the strategy of strategic confrontation came in. At the first meeting after the credit theft, I was silent. I watched every move, every word he said. I knew that at any moment he would try to reinforce his narrative, to convince everyone that this idea had come from him. So I waited until the right moment and let out a question that turned the game around. How did you really come up with this idea, Element? It was a sure blow. Because, you see, when someone steals credit for someone else's work, they don't have the layers of knowledge necessary to support that idea. He may even repeat some nice words. He may even pretend to master the subject. But when pressed with a simple how, everything starts to fall apart. And that's exactly what happened. His silence for a few seconds was enough to make everyone in the room suspicious. He started to stutter, tried to come up with an answer, but realized he was in trouble. I could see the sweat running down his forehead. It was at that moment that I understood that I was in control of the situation. But I didn't stop there. If there's one thing that manipulators hate, it's when they start to lose credibility. So I adopted what I call the social mirror technique. This technique is powerful because it doesn't need direct confrontation. What I did was start exposing his inconsistencies in subtle conversations. When we were in a group, I would ask seemingly innocent questions that forced him to contradict his own words. Something like, "Interesting this approach you mentioned, but I was curious. How exactly did you come to this conclusion, Element?" Gradually, I drew a scenario where he himself became entangled in his own lies. With each new conversation, more people began to realize that there was something strange. Some colleagues who were previously on his side began to change their stance, because no one wants to be associated with someone who can be unmasked at any time. And that's when I prepared the final blow, the game changer. I took advantage of a strategic moment to speak directly with the boss, but I didn't do it as a complaint. I knew that just saying, "He stole my idea," could sound like corporate crying. Instead, I prepared a detailed report with all the documentation of my work, attached emails, messages, and even screenshots of conversations that proved that I was the real person responsible for the project. When I took everything to the boss, my approach was professional and objective. I would like to share some information about the process of this project to ensure that everyone is completely clear about the authorship of the ideas and executions. The boss's reaction was exactly as I expected. He noticed the discrepancy, and since I brought facts and not empty accusations, he could not ignore it. Shortly after, this colleague began to lose space. People began to realize that he wasn't as bright as he made it seem. With no credit, no allies, and no more chances to manipulate the narrative, he became isolated. What happened next? He never tried to steal my credit again. In fact, he began to treat me with a respect he had never shown before. He knew that I was now ready, that I had learned the game, and that he would no longer be able to manipulate me. And that's exactly what you need to understand. In the workplace, it is often not enough just to be good at what you do. You need to know how to protect yourself. You need to understand how these dynamics work and how to turn the tables without getting your hands dirty. Because if you don't, there will always be someone ready to take credit for your effort. Now, I know it may seem difficult at first. I know it can be scary to confront this type of situation, especially when the company's culture favors this type of behavior. But I want you to understand that there are smart ways to position yourself without having to create unnecessary conflicts. What I did was simply learn how to play the game strategically. And you know what the best part is? This approach works in any environment. It doesn't matter if you work in a traditional office, if you are in a startup, if you deal with large or small teams. There will always be people trying to rise at your expense. There will always be someone wanting to steal your merit. But the difference between those who suffer from it and those who protect themselves is in the strategy. Therefore, going forward, I want you to start observing the interactions around you better. Pay attention to how people position themselves, who is really bringing value, and who is just taking advantage of the opportunity. And above all, start recording your work. Never again let your effort be erased because you relied too much on an environment that can be cruel. Now, if you think that's all you need to know, you're mistaken. Because protecting yourself from credit theft is only part of the game. There is something even more important than that. Ensuring that going forward, you are not only recognized, but also respected. And I'll show you exactly how to do that in the next part of this video. If there's one thing I've learned after this experience, it's that in the workplace, it's not enough just to be good at what you do. Unfortunately, talent and dedication are not enough if you don't know how to protect yourself. You can be the most qualified, the most creative, the hardest working professional. But if you don't have a strategy, there will always be someone ready to take advantage of your effort and use it for their own benefit. The corporate world is a game of perception, and those who understand how this dynamic works are much more likely to grow without being harmed. Now, the big question is, how do you ensure that this never happens to you again? How to protect yourself without having to create unnecessary conflicts? How to prevent opportunistic colleagues from appropriating your work and, at the same time, strengthen your image within the company? The good news is that there are some simple but extremely effective strategies that can completely transform the way you are perceived and valued in your professional environment. The first thing you need to do from now on is to record absolutely everything. That's the #1 rule to prevent someone from stealing credit for your work. Any idea you have, any contribution you make to a project, any relevant suggestion you make in a meeting, all of this needs to be documented in some way. If you share an idea with a colleague via email or message, save that record. If you attend a meeting and make an important suggestion, send a follow-up to the team reinforcing the points discussed. Have concrete proof that you were the one who generated that amount. Because in the end, what weighs most is not what you say, but what you can prove. Also, a very common mistake people make is sharing ideas ahead of time. I know, sometimes we're so excited about a project, so confident that we're doing something amazing, that we want to tell everybody. But what happens? There is always someone watching, waiting for a gap to appropriate your idea and present it as if it were theirs. So before you lay out your strategies and insights to anyone, make sure you already have a solid plan for how and when to present them in the right way. Some people aren't listening to contribute, they are listening to steal. And that brings us to an essential point. You need to be seen. Often the reason a colleague is able to steal your credit is because you just don't position yourself as you should. It's no use just doing excellent work behind the scenes and waiting for recognition to come automatically. You need to make sure that the right people are associating your name with the results you generate. This means that whenever possible, you should present your own work, speak directly to your superiors about your contributions, and ensure that your value is recognized. And here comes a strategy that can make all the difference. Build strategic alliances within the company. Many people underestimate the power of connections in the workplace, but the truth is that having allies can be what separates someone who grows up in the company from someone who is invisible. Having trusted colleagues who recognize your work and who can be witnesses to your competence is essential, because when you have a support network, it becomes much harder for any manipulator to distort reality. When there are several people who know that a certain idea came from you, the opportunist loses strength. But what if you already notice that someone is trying to appropriate your work? How to deal with this without creating a direct conflict? The answer lies in the intelligent use of strategic questions. Instead of openly accusing the person, which could lead to a hostile environment, use questions that force the other person to contradict themselves. Something like, "What inspired you to come to this conclusion?" Or, "Can you explain to me better how you developed this idea?" Element. If the person is lying, the lack of depth in the answers will be evident, and this will cause them to lose credibility little by little. And there is one more crucial detail. Take care of your reputation within the company. People tend to believe more in those who have a strong and consistent image. If you position yourself as a safe, confident professional, owner of your own work, hardly anyone will be able to take away your credit. And that doesn't mean being arrogant or trying to self-promote all the time. It just means being strategic, showing authority over what you do, and making sure the right people know your value. Now, I know it may seem unfair to have to worry about all of this. After all, in the ideal world, recognition would automatically come to those who really deserve it. But the reality of the job market is different. If you don't position yourself in the right way, someone else will do it for you, and not always in your favor. So, from now on, I want you to start paying attention to every detail of your professional routine. Observe how the people around you behave. Notice who really contributes and who just takes the opportunity to stand out at the expense of others. Be intentional about how you present yourself, how you record your work, and how you build your reputation. And most importantly, never let your effort be erased because you relied too much on the environment around you. From now on, you have the right knowledge and tools to protect yourself and ensure that your work is valued the way it deserves. But there's still something you need to understand. If you've come this far, you now know that the workplace is not a space where talent and effort alone are enough. The reality is that without strategy, without awareness of power dynamics, and without a firm stance to protect yourself, you always risk being left behind. And I know that hurts. I know that the feeling of having your credit stolen, seeing someone else take credit for your effort, being ignored while someone shines at your expense, is deeply frustrating. But now, with all that we've talked about, you're no longer a helpless victim of this corporate game. You have the tools to change that and make sure your presence at work is recognized fairly and respected. From now on, every idea you have, every project you develop, every small contribution you make must be documented and protected. Never underestimate the power of proof again. The job market values facts, evidence, and a clear position. And if you still had the habit of blindly trusting that the truth always comes out, forget about it. The truth only comes out when you know how to show it, when you have records, and when you build an unshakable reputation. You already know how to do this. Now it's time to put it into practice. And It's not enough to just protect yourself. You also need to understand that the way you position yourself in the workplace defines the perception that others have of you. If until today you have been too discreet, hoping that your results will speak for themselves, it is time to change this approach. The corporate world favors those who know how to communicate their value, those who create strategic alliances, those who understand that networking is not just about making friends, but about building a network of protection against saboteurs. If you haven't started doing this yet, start now. Now tell me here in the comments, have you ever had your credit stolen at work? Have you ever been in a situation where you saw someone take ownership of your effort and take the merits instead? I really want to know your story, because this is a problem that happens all the time, and the more we share these experiences, the more we can understand the patterns and protect ourselves. So, if you've experienced this, leave your experience with the "nobody steals my credit" here in the comments. And look, if this content made sense to you, if you learned something new, if you now feel more prepared to deal with this type of situation, leave the like here in the video. This is the kind of information that you are not taught in school, but that can define the course of your career. So if you want more content like this, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell, because here I will bring you the best strategies to deal with conflicts at work, protect yourself from saboteurs, and build a strong and respected career. Now, if you found this problem complicated, let me warn you, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Did you know that there are at least 5 types of toxic colleagues who can not only steal your credit, but also completely ruin your reputation, undermine your credibility, and even get you fired? Well, and the worst, many times they do it without you realizing it. But calm down, because in the next video I'm going to show you exactly who these undercover saboteurs are, how to spot them before it's too late, and most importantly, how to shield yourself against them. So don't waste time. Click on the video that is appearing on the screen now and get ready to see your work environment in a completely new way. See you there.